Chapter 3: Entry and Exit Techniques. Traders should use the AVWAP's ability to identify levels of support or resistance to their advantage. One way to do that is to wait for a test of an AVWAP level and to purchase the stock on the first touch of the AVWAP and hope that it holds. The other option is to observe the action around the AVWAP and treat it as a level of interest on a shorter time frame. If your choice is to observe, the next step is to wait for evidence that the buyers are serious about their actions and will defend AVWAP. Once it is clear the stock has found support or resistance at the AVWAP, we can enter the stock and place a stop. Now we will explore both options in more detail. Option A: buy the touch purchase, or sell short, just as the stock touches AVWAP. This is not my preference, as I am more risk-averse and there is no assurance the stock will bounce from the AVWAP. Paul Levine, Ph.D., was a pioneer in AVWAP analysis and gave the term porosity to describe how AVWAPs are general areas, not precise numbers. That said, there are times when a stock will touch the AVWAP to the penny and reverse immediately. When a stock is far beyond the AVWAP, point 2 in Chart 3.1, I view this intuitively, while others may use standard deviation bands. Chart 3.0 shows the AVWAP as well as standard deviation bands. As always, any trade setup is more likely to be successful when trends are aligned with longer time frames of the stock and the trend of the overall market. If you buy at each touch of AVWAP, it is sometimes possible to purchase at the exact turning point, but you run the risk the stock may continue lower, point 4 in Chart 3.1. If the stock does not bounce from the AVWAP, it's difficult to find a price-based level for your stop because there is often a lack of a lower high nearby to place the stop under. The stock in Chart 3.1 made an important near-term low on October 24, 1. That is where we set our anchor. Note that large distance between price and the AVWAP 2. When prices extend far from the AVWAP, new purchases are considered to be riskier. On November 2, the stock pulled back to the AVWAP 3 from that low and bounced precisely from that level. 2 days later, the stock came back to the AVWAP 4, and this time failed to bounce. This example shows one instance where the trader would have made money immediately if he purchased the touch of the AVWAP 3. It also shows where the stock continued to decline through the AVWAP, which would have resulted in a loss 4. AVWAP levels are not always an automatic place to do business, and you must decide through trial and error if you prefer to buy the touch or wait for the stock to bounce from the AVWAP before you make a purchase. I cover this at length in Chapter 7. Buy pullbacks and breakouts. The stock in Chart 3.2 continued in its uptrend from the early February anchor point, but the purchases right at the AVWAP, green arrows, from the low didn't all immediately result in a gain. It can be better to purchase when the stock rises again, the bounce. The green dots show these points. When we purchase with momentum, we take part as the new trend begins. We can place a stop below the preceding higher low to protect us in the event that the price action does not follow through. A purchase right at the AVWAP touch does not allow us to have a consistent low-risk stop level based on price action. Option B: enter with momentum. Purchasing the stock after it tests the AVWAP and bounces away from it is the lower-risk entry. A short sale after a test of AVWAP followed by a decline is the lower-risk short entry. In this type of setup, we have evidence that buyers have defended the AVWAP successfully before we put our money at risk. Momentum is on our side with these entries, long and short. The AVWAP allows us to find exactly where and when the sellers are overwhelmed and buyers have regained control. This type of entry allows us to enter at the onset of new momentum and easily define our risk. I like to be right from the start and enter a trade with momentum. Let others jump the gun, do the dirty work, and take the larger associated risks while support forms. If you are in the right neighborhood, there will still be plenty of opportunity for profit and with less risk. Wait patiently for the signal. A general guideline would be 3 to 5 bars for the time frame you are on to enter so you have a level to trade against. We want to enter after buyers or sellers have regained control. Buy strength after the dip and short weakness after the rip. In Chart 3.3, the stock made an important high in early January. Once the stock dropped for a few days, that high became the logical place to set our AVWAP, blue arrow. There were several touches of the AVWAP, red arrows, where the stock could have been shorted with minimal initial loss, and that makes it tempting to short at the AVWAP. With the benefit of hindsight, we know these trades would have been profitable, but at that moment, when these trades might have been initiated, the momentum and stop placement price was not clear. That makes these entries risky. The other option is to wait for the stock to drop away from the AVWAP and short as the downward momentum builds, green dots. We could then place a stop above the preceding high, red arrows. This latter entry point assures the stock is moving in the desired direction before our entry. It also provides us with an easily identifiable level for our stop loss in case the stock reverses back higher. In Chart 3.4 we can see how selling short as the stock touches AVWAP, red arrows, would have resulted in choppy trading or, worse, losses. As noted, I prefer to start a short position as the stock drops away from the AVWAP, indicated by the green dots, where the downward momentum is confirmed. Then we can place a stop above the most recent relevant lower high. When you set your stop level based on price action, it allows for greater certainty and confidence in the trade from the start. Which is right for you? There is no one right way for everything, only the right way for you. Whether you decide your approach is to buy just as the stock touches the AVWAP, or if you wait for further evidence before you make an entry. Most people will gravitate toward one or the other. You might have a natural preference about the entry location, or it might take time to develop your preference as you try both methods. Some people might even prefer to take a hybrid approach where they start their position on the first touch of the AVWAP and then add to the position after it proves to be momentum support or resistance. As always, do what is right for you. Make the trade your own. Market psychology. Price has memory, so use it. One of the basic tenets of the study of price history is that broken support acts as resistance. The opposite is also true. Broken resistance acts as support. Support becomes resistance. Have you ever purchased a stock, watched it decline in price, and wish you could just get out at a break even? Me too. This type of buyer's remorse shows up on a chart as resistance. When the stock rallies back to the purchase price and you place your sell order, it adds supply, which becomes a block, however temporary, to the price advancement. Obviously, one person's sale of stock won't typically offer much resistance. When sales occur at a widely recognized level, price memory, shared by many participants, such as a significant moving average or average of AVWAP level, it becomes much harder for the stock to work through the large supply being offered before it can move higher. Don't forget about short sellers here, too. When support breaks, short sellers are in control of the stock and they will try to defend their short position by adding more supply in hopes of not only adding to their short position, but also to scare long holders to liquidate their positions in fear of larger losses, which benefits their short bet. Notice that in Chart 3.5 there were no actual tests of the rising AVWAP. This is an example of a non-textbook example. We often give analysis of AVWAP, or any market approach, an improbable expectation of success. In real trading, it isn't as perfect as some books would lead you to believe. Remember, there is the science of analysis and the more difficult art of trading. Chart 3.6 is a more straightforward example of how the AVWAP, which once provided support, green arrows, became resistance, red arrows. In Chart 3. 7. The AVWAP from the October low, blue arrow on left, showed support twice, 1 and 2, before it flipped to resistance in early January, 3, and then again in early February, 4. If you find me on Twitter in a situation like this, you might hear me refer to points 3 and 4 as AVWAP tap and crap, or AVWAP thump and dump. When the green AVWAP is anchored from the January low, 5, notice how the AVWAP acted as resistance twice after the start of the decline, 6, in early February, and 7, in mid-February. We use price charts to understand the collective reasoning and psychology of market participants, so we can objectively prepare our trade plan. When traditional support breaks and then acts as resistance, it means that there has been a greater number of participants anchored at that price level, which, in turn, can lead to a larger opposite move when the price breaks. When price breaks a major level of support, the trapped longs will have a propensity to get out at break-even, and as they sell shares, the supply from these participants helps to form resistance. Resistance becomes support. The same emotions come into play when a stock forms support on a chart. Have you ever sold a stock after it has done nothing for months and then see it almost immediately turn higher without you? It is as if they know you are out and agree to take the stock higher without you. Of course, this doesn't really happen, but you probably wish you could buy your shares back at your original cost. As sellers start to take advantage of the rising price, causing the stock to pull back toward the breakout level, you may decide to get back in. Others, with sidelined cash, may also be motivated to join in on what appears to be a new uptrend. Don't forget about those short sellers. If you were shorting the stock and it breaks out, it may motivate you to purchase your stock on the pullback before it begins a move higher. These short covering purchases are strictly about limiting losses, which can quickly spiral out of control if the stock follows through on the breakout. These actions, repeated by many buyers and sellers, form support for a stock's price. Charts 3.8 and 3.9 show traditional, horizontal, resistance versus AVWAP support and resistance, with 3.8 as traditional and 3.9 as AVWAP. The AVWAP provides dynamic evidence of support and resistance. Chart 3.8 shows what has been referred to as horizontal or traditional support, green, becoming resistance, red. Chart 3.9 shows the AVWAP from a former peak becomes support after the stock makes it back up above that prior resistance. Both techniques of measuring support and resistance are valuable, but by using AVWAP, pricing activity is revealed to be more granular, and you can see subtle changes in trends. This makes it easier for you to more precisely time a purchase or sale. Charts 3.10 and 3.11 also illustrate the differences of the two methods of finding levels of support and resistance. Active traders who use traditional measures of support would miss a number of opportunities to buy or sell. For example, based on what you've read so far, can you see in Chart 3.11 where the two green arrows show areas of interest for setting up trades? These areas are not so easily identified in Chart 3.10. By using AVWAP, traders can see the transition from support to resistance more quickly and precisely. The more times support or resistance is tested, the more likely it is to fail. This is a simple, but important concept. Traders' impatience is demonstrated by the frequency of tests made to support and resistance. Monitor this impatience carefully for signs of potential for the price to move out of the current range. Price level breakouts may trigger an important turn in the trading activity of the average participant, and, as we will see, they are excellent places from which to anchor our AVWAP. When traditional resistance breaks and then acts as support, larger moves often occur on the upside. When prices break a major level of resistance, the trapped shorts will look to get out at break even by purchasing shares to cover their positions, and the demand from these participants helps to form support. The two charts below show the concept of how broken resistance becomes support. I came up with a couple of corny ways to remember them. AVWAP kiss and run, or AVWAP tap and snap. Chart 3.12 shows two instances where resistance provided by the AVWAPs anchored to separate points broke 1, 2, and then flipped to support 3, 4 over the course of just 4 days. In Chart 3.13, the daily chart saw the AVWAP from the early peak act as resistance, red arrows, before buyers took control and then defended pullbacks to the AVWAP, where it formed support, green arrows. Eventually, the buyers soaked up all the supply offered, and the stock experienced a great run higher. In the two charts on page 77, we see the same concepts on different timeframes for further reinforcement. The stock in charts 3.14 and 3.15 show two different timeframes of the same stock where broken AVWAP resistance became support. Chart 3.14 shows 2.5 months of trades, while Chart 3.15 shows 6 weeks of trades on a 65-minute timeframe. The repetition of the pattern on different time frames is a great example of a fractal playing out with support and resistance. The longer a consolidation zone, period of relative stability in price, has taken time to develop, the greater the move away from it will be as more energy has built up. There is a larger group of traders who will benefit from a momentum push away from the consolidation. A good way to remember this is, the bigger the top, the bigger the drop, and the bigger the base, the higher in space. We will delve more into market structure and trends, which are formed by directional support and resistance zones. Key levels and price targets. When we purchase a stock, it is good to know where it has the potential to go, and an AVWAP from a prior important peak will often become resistance for the stock. When a stock makes a large move and there are no levels of traditional support or resistance to be found on the chart, except for the AVWAP, it is a good idea to look at prior important highs and lows as anchor points. It is uncanny how often you will see a stock halt at an AVWAP from a prior high or low. Knowledge of these levels in advance allow us to approximate a target for the price move. Price targets are not necessarily a place to take profit, but to manage risk with tighter stops, so that if the stock does reverse, we can lock in large gains. If you bought this stock, 3.16, based on your analysis of shorter time frames, it would have been wise to be aware of where the AVWAP lies in relation to the peaks, green dots. The stock made 2 quick moves up to the AVWAP and then came back down. This is a common occurrence in stocks that experience a bounce up toward the AVWAP. When a stock in a longer uptrend experiences a large drop, traders will often start buying when the price drops to the AVWAP anchored at an important prior lower price, as seen in chart 3.17. A place for a short seller to lock in a profit would have been at the green dot, which is where the price met the purple AVWAP. This had been set from a prior important low, and would have been a reasonable place for a bounce in price. Going deeper, support and resistance failure. Support and resistance levels are not concrete. They are not guaranteed to hold. Eventually the tone of the market will change from bullish to bearish and vice versa. When key support and resistance levels break, be ready to act to protect your accumulated gains because large moves in the opposite direction can come quickly. The next 4 charts illustrate 2 bullish, 3.18 and 3.19, and 2 bearish, 3.20 and 3.21, examples. Charts 3.18 and 3.19 show stocks which repetitively tested the AVWAP from the prior significant low before the trend reversed lower. As the stocks experienced decent rallies, the rate of ascent in the AVWAPs slowed, resulting in even more frequent market testing of the AVWAPs. Prices eventually broke the AVWAP support and began quick declines. Recognition of this tendency will allow you to exit winners with the bulk of your profits intact before reversals take place. For more aggressive traders, the drop away from AVWAP can also provide an early entry into a reversal. The 2 stocks in charts 3.20 and 3.21 were in downtrends and consistently found sellers at the AVWAPs, red arrows, which were anchored to the significant high prior to the decline. As the stocks declined further, the AVWAPs were tested repeatedly, which eventually overwhelmed sellers and the stock reversed to an upward trend. The repeated tests of AVWAP chewed through supply as the persistent buyers became more aggressive. You can use the concepts of AVWAP support and resistance on a standalone basis for a trade system, and you will probably achieve positive results. Of course, you also must manage risk effectively. Do not confuse simple with ineffective. All too many people want a complicated approach, but simplicity is the market's greatest disguise. After all, stock prices move because of supply and demand. We don't have to be obsessed with the why behind the moves. The strategies in the chapters ahead will assume you have read and understand the concepts discussed here. They are the building blocks of the layers we add on top of basic support and resistance. Risk management. It can be difficult to wait patiently for conditions to develop into your ideal time to make a trade and to resist the temptation to get involved early. Too many times, traders give in to FOMO and buy before AVWAP provides evidence confirming who has regained control. Thus, they suffer needless losses. For longer than I care to admit, this was a problem for me. I would be sure a stock was ready to go, so I would get involved before the price action confirmed momentum. Once in a while, I would get lucky on this type of entry, but over the long term, these trades ended up costing me money.